Yeah, so to me, as a head coach, when you're looking at your staff, the two things that are ultimately critical are alignment and then fit. One, does it align with what you're looking for and what you ultimately want your team to look like? And then what is the fit, not only from a schematic standpoint, but also a personality and character standpoint?
Yeah. Welcome to this week's episode of Inside the Headset, presented by CoachComm. This week, we sit down with Western Michigan head coach Lance Taylor. In this episode, Coach Taylor talks about how he approaches the coaching profession with a walk-on mentality, why building meaningful relationships matters so much to him, and how he has continually looked for chances to grow throughout his career. But first, a word from CoachComm.
Deuce left, check with me. If they're in quarters match, we're going to Pittsburgh or Ohio.
They're in zero.
Let's go Hippo, Seattle, wide choice. If we call the protection right, it's 6.
When a play call is the difference between winning and losing, your headset choice could be your most important decision. When the call counts, CoachComm is the only choice for clear, dependable communication. Visit CoachComm.com for more info.
We got it, guys. Good job.
If you enjoyed this episode, please give it a like and leave a review. It really helps others discover the show. We drop new episodes every week, so hit that follow button and never miss a moment. Now, let's get inside the headset with Coach Taylor.
Coach Taylor, how we doing?
Great, Mario. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, I'm super excited about kind of walking through your journey with you and learn a little bit more about you. Obviously, you just joined the board here at the AFCA. We're going to talk about that a little bit at the end, but anytime we have new members on the board, we like to sit down and chop it up. And like I said, just doing my homework on you, I've been able to learn a lot, man, and looking forward to hopping into this first question. When did you know you wanted to be a part of this great profession?
Yeah, for me, I thought I never wanted to be part of the profession. As a player, my coaches used to always tell me, hey, you'll make a great coach one day. And I took that as a slight to my playing acumen,
Yeah.
Hey, you're not a great player, but you're smart, you know all the positions, you can help other guys get lined up. But no, in all honesty, so I got my degree in business at the University of Alabama. Really always wanted to go back and take over the family business. My dad had started a construction company there in Mobile, Alabama, right outside of Mobile, and always had aspirations to go take over the family business. And got an opportunity at the end of my playing career to be a GA at Alabama for Coach Saban. And really, for me, it was more about getting my master's and learning from one of the best to ever do it and carry over some of those principles in business. And really 2 days into the job, I knew it's what I wanted to do. Like I wanted, to make a career, make a profession of it. And I've always loved football. It's always been in my blood and been passionate about it. And really, it's funny how God gets you to your calling, even though you don't know that's what you want to do. He brought me here.
That's right. Well, you had the opportunity to play at a storied program like Alabama. I think your journey is super interesting. You came in as a walk-on. Obviously showed up, knew your position, kind of as you mentioned, but were a contributor to that football team and was able to earn a scholarship and kind of just make those steps and to put yourself in that position and ultimately go play arena football for a few years. Just all the stuff that it takes to go in a football program as a walk-on and go and earn a scholarship and go and earn playing time or earn reps. It's such a hard thing to do, especially at a program like that. How did some of those experiences shape who you are, as you kind of went through the coaching journey?
Yeah, I take pride in saying that I was a walk-on, and honestly, it's been a huge part of shaping who I am and really even the mentality that I carry over today. I don't think most people understand how hard or how difficult it is to be a walk-on. You're paying your own way. You start at the, on the low man on the totem pole, you're on the scout team. And a lot of people don't take pride in their work and really want to continue to grow. And or they don't have the perseverance to get through. But, to me, I carry that chip on my shoulder every single day in terms of being a walk-on. And, I say I'm a walk-on for life. Everything that I've done and everything that I've been, everywhere I've been in my career, I've had to earn it. And it hadn't been easy for me. It was never, just like as a player, I was never the most talented, never the biggest, never the fastest. But, I loved the game. I was a great teammate, and I was going to, work my tail off on and off the field to give myself every opportunity. And, I'm thankful for the coaches that have poured into my life. Honestly, that's another piece of why I got into coaching, because outside of my parents, the people who had the biggest impact and influence in my life and shaped me who I am as a man and helped give me opportunities and where I am today were my coaches.
Yeah.
And I want to make that same impact in young men's lives. And to me, that's why college football is the greatest sport. Because of the impact that you get to make. They're at such an impressionable age. But, as a walk-on, it really was that mentality to grind and earn everything, no matter where you start, to continue to push through and really try to outwork everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. I kind of feel like, sticking your foot in the profession at the beginning, especially as you're, grinding your way as a GA, quality control, and some of those jobs that don't get as much notoriety is very similar to just being a college football player in general. But I think having a walk-on experience, kind of amplifies some of those experiences. So that's awesome. I appreciate you sharing. So you mentioned you played a little bit of arena ball for a couple years, and then you were able to kind of start your coaching career in 2007, I believe, was Coach Saban's first year. How were you able to kind of line yourself at that point in time to come back and join that staff?
Yeah, it's interesting how things work. I was playing arena football, had an injury while I was playing arena football, so I actually came back to Tuscaloosa. Had our team doctors, Dr. King, Dr. Andrews, did my surgery, and so I was back in Tuscaloosa training and rehabbing. Coach Saban, was building his first staff there. And, I got to know several of the staff members because I was in there every single day, kind of rehabbing. Felt like I was going to go back and play arena football again. I was trying to go back and play. And they had an opportunity open up late, right before spring ball. Got left and they had a GA spot open and asked would I be interested in interviewing for it. And again, my aspirations were when football was over, as a playing career, I was going to go back in, and go into the family business. And so, but it was an opportunity for me, as a former Alabama player to, meet the new head coach, Coach Saban, even though I had to wait for him, get an opportunity to, interview and see if it was a fit and, possibly get my master's paid for. And for me, I just wanted to be a sponge. When they hired me as a GA, to me, I carried that walk-on mentality that no job was too big, for me. And I wanted to really, be seen, not heard. And really do all the dirty work to show that I belonged and I wanted to be there and wanted to learn from the best, and those really shaped who I am even today. I carry those things over. It was such a great experience for me, learning from one of the greatest to ever do it, college football. And Coach Saban has meant so much to me in my career. Just who he is, how detailed he is. He talks about being process driven, process oriented,
right.
And comes to the process every single day. But for him, he had his hands in every aspect of the program, from recruiting to X's and O's. On X's and O's side, he was involved in offense, he was involved in defense, special teams. He was a great motivator, from strength and condition. All those aspects, I still draw on today as a head coach. And really, I'm even more amazed after being a head coach how he was able to do those things at such a high level. And so it gave me a great opportunity in my first bat, at bat as a coach, to get a glimpse of what it looks like to do it at a really detailed, high level place under a great, mentor of mine.
Absolutely. Now, obviously at that point in time, Nick Saban probably, he still had a name for sure. He's still impacted college football in so many ways, but that name is, ultimately transcended quite a bit since that time frame. As a former player and then kind of having that 2-year gap, being able to step back under this new guy, were you able to, obviously you're not going to foresee all the national championships and accolades that kind of transpired over the last, decade and a half, but were you kind of able to see, man, hey, this is different or this is special, and kind of take some of those nuggets away and bring it with you as a coach?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that was really valuable for me because, as a player, I didn't play for Coach Saban. And then, I go back a couple of years later and now I'm really on his first staff, really how he changed the culture and mindset. And you knew really early on, you knew he was special and it was going to be, he was going to flip the mentality and mindset, and just how he did it, just being on the ground level. Seeing, how it was as I was as a player, and I was fortunate enough to play for some really good coaches and be on some really good teams, but it was just different. The level of detail, the attention to detail, the laser focus and everything that he did, really it transcended everything in the program and every aspect of it. And everybody was held to the same standard. It didn't matter who you were. So, I appreciated that as a player and really saw, I felt like, I would have loved to play for Coach Saban just because of the mindset and mentality that he brings. And, I think that players that do things the right way and are hungry and driven and motivated to be the best at what they do, they love playing for them. And so, those were the things that really stuck out to me. And, I've used them all along my, path as a coach and throughout my career, but especially now as a head coach, being able to draw on some of those things, coming in and trying to change the culture and program when you come in as a first-time head coach and really trying to flip the culture and set a standard of excellence in everything that you do has been great for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you kind of mentioned as you took the job, there was maybe you were thinking a little bit about going back to the family business. At what point in time were you like, this is the profession, this is what I'm going to do? What point did you fall in love with this thing?
Yeah, it was really early on.
Really
I mean, probably the first day we were on the grass for spring practice. I've always loved the game of football. It's been in my blood. I've always been passionate about it and studied the game. And, it's really been, a love of mine for a really long time, even as a player. And what drew me and why I was passionate as a player and as a coach was just my love for the game. And, being around the game from that level, it was so different than being there, as a coach as opposed to being a player. One, the X's and O's part of it, really the mental battle and mental challenges, and the behind the scenes was great for me to learn. And it was the closest thing to playing and being, feeling that competitive fire and, really, really feeling that competitive edge that you can be other than playing.
Now, and after your 2 years there as a GA, you're soaking up the game and obviously around one of the best in the business. And, the first couple of years were the most difficult in the profession, just kind of kicking in the door for that first job. Obviously been an alum that was very helpful for you, but now it's time to kick in the door, to a job that's outside of that Alabama office. Appalachian State ends up being your next job. You go and coach receivers there. How did you, go and pursue that job, go and interview and ultimately land it?
Yeah, I mean, again, and I've said this several times, but I keep coming back to that walk-on mentality.
Yeah.
I always prepared for the job that I wanted. And so as a GA, I wanted to do all the small jobs, all the things that I was asked to do, help make the coaches' lives easier and do everything that, I was asked to do from a GA standpoint. But I also wanted to be prepared when I had that opportunity to be a coach. And so, that was one of the things that, I was fortunate, while I worked at Alabama to prepare for that opportunity. And, Coach Saban, again, was great to me when I got ready, when I had that opportunity at Appalachian State. He called Coach Jerry Moore and, recommended me for the job. And he just said, Lance, he said, you need an opportunity. You've done a great job here. You've really grown in the 2 years that you've been here, but you need an opportunity to go run your own ring, to actually be out on the road recruiting, to do it yourself and really, go through the growing pains, to really grow and develop and take that next step as a coach and a teacher. And it was great. I got to go to App State in 2009. They were still FCS at the time. Jerry Moore, who's, in the College Football Hall of Fame, he was our head coach there. They had won 3 straight national championships. They had beaten Michigan. I mean, App State was a really, unique experience. And, you just hit the ground running. And it's just like everything else that you do as a player and as a coach, you adapt and you adjust. I mean, a lot of things that I had to learn on the fly. And, a lot of things that I didn't know that I thought I knew. I realized, there was a lot that I didn't know. But again, being able to call on those people that, had made an impact in my life and how have you done this in the past? I mean, I was fortunate enough, as a player, Dabo Sweeney was my position coach when I was a freshman and sophomore.
Yeah.
So, just having, being able to call, Coach Sweeney, he's been a great mentor and made a huge impact in my life. And so, I've been very blessed in my life and in my career as a player and a coach to be surrounded by really great people and them be willing and able to pour back into me. And, I've just always used those, relationships. And to me, that's what this thing is about, football as a player, as a coach, as a, recruiter, all those things as a motivator. It's all about relationships. And, that's got to be every single day is one, very intentional in the relationships, and very present in who I am.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be Coach Saban. I can't be Coach Wayne. I can't be Coach Moore. I can be Lance Taylor, and I want to be the best version of myself every single day for our players and for our staff.
What's cool, just sitting here as a former college coach myself, and just a fan of the football, a fan of ball, and great coaches for the last decade. And my role here at the AFCA, you talk about you play for Dabo, your first experience in the professions with Nick Saban, and then Coach Moore at App State. I mean, you in the moments, I'm not sure if you probably value that, but now you look back here in 2025, and you're like, golly, man, I had such a great advantage early on in my career, just being able to be a sponge to these fantastic guys. But let me brag on you real quick here. In that year at App State, you led the receivers to App State school records and receptions of 284 and receiving yards, 3,600 yards, a little bit over that. Now, obviously, you're not sitting in this seat if you're not good at what you do. And obviously, you're not kicking out some of those records if you're not good at what you do. But you kind of mentioned, right, when you GA at the Division I level, you do miss out on some opportunities to maybe get out on the road, have your own room, all that kind of stuff. What were some of the hardships in that first year where you had to kind of step up to the plate and say, okay, hey, you know what? I got to get better at this.
Yeah, I mean, you just mentioned it from a recruiting standpoint. I mean, as a GA, you can do on-campus recruiting, but you're not going out recruiting. You're not going to schools. So the first time that I go out for spring recruiting, I've got an atlas. This is before, This is really before, Google Maps and all that, everything's charted for you, and, you plug it into your GPS on your phone. I mean, you got your maps. You're trying to plan out your day. I mean, I pull up to the school. I don't know whether to go through the front door, go through the steps, go to the field house. I mean, all of those things you just learn. And again, you try to grow and adapt. And, as a coach, I think one of the things that you learn most when you get a chance to run your own room is it's those day-to-day true problem-solving skills that you have to really learn to develop. Whether it's a player that comes in and he's got an off-the-field issue, or he's got an academic issue, or it's during the game and you're trying to have to make a sideline adjustment. A guy's struggling getting off press, or he drops the ball and he's in the tank. All those things, there is no how-to book. You have to learn on your own, and you have to sometimes learn through mistakes. And so, that's where, to me, being around some great mentors and great coaches and observing how they interact with players and how they adapt and adjust, I mean, really, I think has been one of the best things that I've been able to view, because nobody, it's not perfect for anybody. As a human and as a coach, we make mistakes too. And so, being able to make those mistakes, but not make the same mistake twice, and trying to learn and grow from those has really been valuable for me in my career and in my life.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that, Coach. Now, when very quickly you decide to make the jump to the NFL, and you join the Jets organization. You're there for a few years and hold multiple roles. It kind of on paper looks like a promotion kind of every single year, some upward mobility there. What was the interest in getting involved in the NFL? And then once again, how did you kick through that door to even have the opportunity to do so?
Yeah. So Armani Edwards was our quarterback at App State, and as Armani was coming out, he was, the first time, only two-time Walter Payton Award winner. He was a special quarterback for us, and really a great player and great person. He was training for the draft and for pro day and the combine. And he asked me, he said, hey, some teams are talking about, possibly working me out at receiver. Can you, help me with some receiver drills and route running? And so he and I worked, some route running and just some receiver drills that he could possibly do at the combine. And he had got invited to the combine. I went up to watch him work out. And one of our former GAs and the guy that I got really close with as a player at Alabama, Mike Bloomgren, was at the combine. He was the assistant offensive coordinator for the Jets, and hadn't seen him in, probably 10 years. And he invited me to dinner that night with him and the offensive coordinator, Brian Schottenheimer. And so I go to dinner. Next thing I know, it turns into an interview that I didn't even know I was having. And a couple of weeks later, they offered me a job. And so, for me, it was an opportunity to continue to grow, to learn from the best, and do it at the highest level. And the NFL meant so much for me in my career because, you get to go and it's about football 24/7, and you're around some great coaches and some great players, and, you're at the highest level, really. I always say that I got my PhD and doctorate in coaching and football by going to the NFL. And it was a great experience for me, learned under some great people. Our head coach was Rex Ryan. Went to back-to-back AFC championship games. I mean, really had some great players and great run there in New York, and that was pretty special for me. One I wasn't looking for, and that's one thing that I would just say is I've always tried to do the best job at the job I've got. Not looking for the next job, but whatever I'm asked to do, I've really just tried to do the best job to make sure that I'm prepared for the opportunity if I ever get an opportunity. But not looking for that opportunity. And when you do things the right way and treat people the right way, good things happen.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, especially since you just mentioned this, that you weren't necessarily looking for a job, right? You just went there, and it just kind of worked out that way. What were some of the things that after you got offered this job, just by casually having some dinner and talking a little ball, what were some of the things you had to consider? You're still very young in your profession at this point in time. Just started to kind of move around in the profession just a little bit, moving from Alabama to App State. What were some of the things you had to sit down? I don't know if you were married at this point or not, but what's the dialogue like when making such a tough decision?
Yeah, it was a tough decision, and honestly, for me, I didn't think I was going to take the job. I really wanted to stay at App State because I'd only been a full-time position coach for 1 year. I'd worked as a GA, and as a GA, all you want to do is be able to coach your own room. And I finally had my own room, and we had a special team, and we had a special room. I mean, at App State, you mentioned the records that we broke. We had 3 receivers in that group that all played in the NFL for multiple seasons. That was a special group for, a group at App State, and was very fortunate to be able to coach those guys. And I loved working for Coach Moore. I loved having my own room and being able to coach and teach. And, you do all the things that you have to do to be able to do the things that you want to do and be able to coach. I did I went through being a GA and, going through that route. And so I didn't know that I wanted to go back and be, quality control coach. I really didn't. And so, thankfully, talked to, people I trust in my circle, my parents, my father always gives great advice. I always lean on him. He's very insightful and always, a guy that I can lean on. But I also call the people that I trust, within the profession who really could give me some great advice. And everybody that I called in the profession said, Lance, you have an opportunity to work in the NFL. That's something that, you can grow. You will grow and learn. You will grow and develop. It will be one of the best things that you've ever done for your career, and one of the best things that you can do for yourself professionally to grow and develop is to go see it at the highest level and do it at the NFL level. And it really was. And, I'm thankful, I'm not smart enough to make some of those decisions, but thankfully, the people who are close to me and giving me good advice over the years, I am smart enough to take great advice.
Yeah, that's right. That's a nice little quote there. Now, and you took the job as an intern, then went to offensive quality control, then went to assistant tight ends coach over kind of a 3-year frame. Had some success there. Once again, you're under Rex Ryan, Brian Schottenheimer, Mike Bloomgren. We had on podcast here not too long ago. Once again, these names so early in your career is just awesome. But you said earlier, I got a PhD, in football at that point in time over those 3 years. What does that mean? Obviously you don't have to break down all the schematics and everything, but what was so special about that opportunity and being able to just absorb all that and grow in those 3 years?
Yeah, I think, learning from guys at the highest level, the one thing about the NFL is all football. In college, you devote a lot of your time to recruiting and evaluating. That takes you away from, being able to truly schematically, go year round and dive into, the nth degree of scheme in football. And so, when you talk about on the offensive side, Brian Schottenheimer, who's now the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys, brilliant mind, offensively, especially pass game, running game, play calling. He was great. Mike Bloomgren has been a great mentor of mine. Also, Coach Callahan was our offensive line coach. And then on the other side of the ball, you've got Mike Pettin and Rex Ryan, who are 2 of the best defensive minds at the highest level of NFL football. I got to, sit there and learn from those guys every single day. And so, for me, it really expedited my growth. just as a young coach, and was exposed to it at that level. And even the thing that you learn really quickly is players at that level, the ones who have success and, have long careers, it's because they understand the football. They understand, they have great football IQ. They understand the game at a high level, and they've studied it like a coach. They're a coach on the field. And so if you're going to be able to coach and teach and help those guys be better, you better know it at the nth degree.
Yeah. Now, just kind of a segue there, when you're talking about being at App State, you talked about that, the player-coach relationship, the daily stuff. Hey, coach, my girlfriend broke up with me. Just the kind of problems that you get at the collegiate level. What is that player-coach relationship like in the NFL as a comparison?
Yeah, it's different. The relationship is still there. They still have off-the-field problems, but the time they're different problems, right? Other than rookies and, really young players, a lot of those guys have families to take care of. They have mouths to feed. They're a little bit grown and more mature. They have contracts to worry about. They have, future contracts to worry about or incentives to worry about. The relationship is different, but it's still a relationship. And, that's where, to me, being able to build great relationships is, whether, it's college age kids or it's, NFL, age grown men that are going on their third contract, being able to develop those relationships because you care about them and you're trying to help what's best for them and their long-term success. I think people always gravitate towards that. They always appreciate when you're honest and you're real and you want to help them grow and succeed. But you are more of it's more of a business in the NFL for sure.
Yeah.
That relationship, is more, you're more of a manager than you are, anything else.
I got you. But yeah, to your point, I love that you made the point of relationships are still relationships regardless of what level, that you're coaching at, and that part still factors in. So in 13, you take the assistant wide receiver job there with the Panthers. What surrounded that situation for you to transition over there?
Yeah, we had some transition, with the Jets. Schottenheimer, Mike Bloomgren, who we're really close with, they took other jobs. I had an opportunity, one, to continue to grow and ascend and take the next step in my development as a coach and be the assistant wide receivers coach at the Panthers with a guy that I played for. So Mike Shula was the offensive coordinator. So Mike Shula was my head coach at Alabama when I was my senior season in 2003. And so the relation, again, it came back down to relationships. I also wanted to learn from, a guy, Ricky Kroll was the wide receiver coach. I'd always admired his career and watched his career, and had built a good relationship with him and really wanted to learn under him and grow. And
once again, you throw Mike Shula in there. That's I didn't do my homework on who you actually played for, and so just another phenomenal name to kind of be a part of. Now getting back to your home position there a little bit as a wide receiver coach, what was advantageous just for you to kind of be a little bit more, I won't say comfortable because I'm sure you were just as comfortable with those other positions, but what was it like for you to kind of get back to that home position, I guess?
Yeah, that was one of the other things that really drew me to it is having played receiver and then even coached receiver early in my career. I mean, I love receiver play. I love being in that room. It's a fun room. It's energetic. I'm passionate about technique and fundamentals. I think it's one of the most technical positions in football. And I love teaching it at a high level. And I felt like for me, getting back to the receiver room was great. It was like going back home. But it was also an opportunity for me to learn and continue to grow my craft as a receiver coach, learning from one of the best, to do it in Ricky Kroll, who had a really long career and did it at a really high level. And so, for me, it was, multifaceted there.
Absolutely. Now we're going to push the timeout button on the Panthers because you will return here in a couple of years. But in 2014, you made the decision to come back to the collegiate level. Now hearing the story, I got an inkling on kind of why you ended up there at Stanford. But what was the situation around that? And then talking about being back at your home position, you're now running backs coach, I believe, for the first time. But what was the situation for you to go to Stanford, and why'd you accept it?
Yeah, a common theme in my coaching career and just my ladder has been Mike Bloomgren. close friend, great mentor. I can't say enough. Just, again, it goes all the way back to my playing days when he was a graduate assistant. But when you want to talk about a guy who builds great relationship and truly cares about people, he's one of the most loyal guys that I've ever been around. And he always cared about whether, I was on his team or I wasn't. It was, he still cared about me, and he tried to help me grow. And he's been one of those guys that I've been able to lean on and really been a great mentor for me, great friend, great family friend. And so he was the offensive coordinator at Stanford. He called me, I was actually out in Hawaii at the Pro Bowl. Got to coach in the Pro Bowl that year with the Panthers.
Oh, wow.
When we got put out of the playoffs. And so I'm actually in Hawaii, and he called and asked would I be interested in interviewing for their running back job. And my wife was pregnant at the time. I think she was about 6 months pregnant. And, we're in Hawaii at the Pro Bowl. I'm like, man, I think I'm good.
Yeah. Life's
I'm
good.
enjoying this year in Carolina.
Right.
And, like most great recruiters, he recruited me and told me on, great opportunity there and opportunity to, work with a talented group. They were running the ball really well. They were playing, really well. I think they had just come off of a Pac-12 championship and a Rose Bowl appearance against Michigan State. Coach David Shaw was the head coach. And so he said, hey, just come out here and interview, see if it'd be something. And so anyway, I flew to California when we got back home from the Pro Bowl. I flew to California and interviewed for the job there. Really fell in love with the place. Really fell in love with Coach Shaw, his mentality, and the program that he was running. And it was, again, an opportunity to work with a guy that I knew really closely. It was a chance to have my own position group again, a different position group than I'd worked with. So I thought it was another opportunity to continue to grow my coaching acumen. And, I always have tried to take the harder path that would cause me to grow, to get out of my comfort zone.
Yeah.
I love being in the receiver room. I always have. But I've always tried to get out of the receiver room to grow and really push myself out of my comfort zone, because each position is so unique, as we all know.
Yeah.
That's what I love about football. Each position group is so unique, but we all have to come together and play together to have success. And that's, again, what makes, football the greatest sport. So made it, Coach Shaw offered me while I was out there on the interview. And, I accepted and, told my wife, who now was 7 months pregnant, that we were moving across the country. And so she's been a great supporter, and, I really, I appreciate everything that she has, allowed our family to do as we make this journey. And, she has been a strong voice and a person that I lean on, at times, and, one who helped encourage me to take that, even though it's not an easy decision for her. Right. She encouraged me and, thought it would be a great opportunity for my career. Go out to Stanford and, was blessed enough to have a great running back room. A couple of guys that, went to the Heisman finalists, Christian McCaffrey and Bryce Love. Yeah. We loved running the football. That was our bread and butter and what we were going to hang our hat on. And, we had 3 years of great success there under Coach Shaw.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Yeah, I was going to say you coached a couple guys that names might ring a bell to a lot of people, but had some really good players there and able to develop those guys in a new role for you. Now, I want to go back to the interview part of this deal. Now, obviously, through this journey thus far, any interview that you've been on, it hasn't been one where you got to show up and do a great job. Not that's not going to be your goal anyways, but it wasn't a ton of pressure because you had a job. When you went and sat in on those interviews, from your standpoint, when you're trying to make a tough decision from leaving the NFL, like you said, you had a great situation out there to go into another historically good college program with a running back room full of some really good ball carriers. What kind of stuff is going through your mind as you're going through campus and trying to make that decision versus, I'm going to take this job. They offer it to me because I just got fired,
Yeah, I think one of the things that I've been really fortunate to be able to do is have some really tough decisions. Yeah. I've had to leave good jobs for another good job, which are great problems to have, right? Absolutely. And they're not problems, they're blessings. And so the perspective of that, I also, I go back to my days as a walk-on. I think being a walk-on and, as a walk-on, you're not on scholarship, you're paying for everything. we didn't even have the same locker. When I was at Alabama, we didn't even have the same locker room as scholarship players. So, I mean, you felt like you had a scarlet letter on, like you were just segregated, and like not even part of the team at times. We didn't, very, very few of us got to travel with the team or even dress, whether we were playing or not. And so I've been thankful for all the things that, I've been given because of where I've come from. I think, the hard times and the struggles and, the adversity that you have to go through and overcome really makes you, enjoy and appreciate the things that you are given and the opportunities that you're given as a blessing. And so I say all that to say, I've had some, tough decisions to make, leaving a good place to go to another good place. And so for me, a lot of times as I went into the interview process, I was really focused on one, doing a great job during the interview. Yeah. But then also it was an interview for me to see, one, what are the people that I'm going to surround myself with? Can they help me grow and develop, not only professionally, but also personally? And then is it a fit for our family? As you start to, as you have a wife and you're starting to have kids, now it becomes more than just about them. It becomes about our family. And is this going to be a good fit for our family? And so those really have been the things that I've always carried, as I've gone through. It really has been an interview for me as well, to make sure that it's a great fit and it's the right place and the right time for not only me and my career, but also our family.
Absolutely. I love that answer, Coach. We talked about some of the success there that you had within your players and, Pac-12 champs in 2015, 15 Rose Bowl, just some success that you obviously had on the field. For you individually, just to not check the box, but have more experience now on the offensive side. You've coached tight ends, you've coached receivers, now you've coached running backs. What was so special about that, stop in regards to just getting more exposure to offensive football?
Well, one of the things that I love about running back play is when you coach running backs, you're involved in every aspect of the offense. Yeah. It's not just run game, okay? It's pass game, it's protections. I mean, that's where, coaching tight ends and even running backs really forced me to grow and think inside the box. Yeah. As a receiver, you don't even know, you know what I mean? You don't know what a shade or a three technique is. You don't even care what a shade or three technique is. When you're playing receiver, absolutely. When you're outside the box. You move inside the box, and it's a different world. It's a man's game there. And that's where, it really helped flip my mentality from always thinking outside the box and thinking, true coverage base and what's going on with the skill guys to, hey, what are we, what's the front? What's the blitz tendency? What protection are we in? Do we need to remake the ID? And so, I was able to learn run game at a high level under Mike Bloomgren, one of the best O-line coaches that I've ever been under. And when you talk about a guy who can scheme you up and find where the weak link is and find ways to attack your defense, especially running the football, Mike Bloomgren is awesome. And he's great at, O-line technique and fundamentals, really building that mentality of toughness, that brand of football that we wanted to play there at Stanford. And so, I was able to learn all those things. And again, just really pushed me out, helped make me grow outside my comfort zone. But I enjoyed coaching running backs because of those things. You have to understand protection. You have to understand blitz pickup. You have to understand pass game. You have to understand run game.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, 2017, we kind of talked about this earlier. You returned to the Panthers as the receiver coach at this point in time, 2017 and 2018. What led you back, and what were you kind of able to gather there as the receiver coach? This is your first, I guess, where you have your own room there in the NFL.
Yeah, after 2015, got a call from Coach Rivera, who was coach at Carolina Panthers when I was there before, and said, hey, Ricky Kroll is going to retire. I'd like to hire you as the wide receivers coach and bring him back. Would you be interested? And said, absolutely, Coach. I mean, one, I loved working for Coach Rivera. We loved the city of Charlotte and the team, and there was still a great core group of guys that were there. We were having a lot of success. They were having a lot of success even after I left. And, for me, I'd been in the NFL already with the Jets and the Panthers, but I'd never been a full position coach. I'd never had my own room. And so, again, it was an opportunity for me to grow. I always looked at each opportunity as, hey, how am I growing in this experience? Yeah. I don't want to, have a bunch of bullet points that are the same. But he's only coached wideouts for all of his career. Mm-hmm. He's only done, So I wanted to be able to, one, pushed me out of my comfort zone so that I could grow, but also create those, the bigger, larger picture. Because I knew ultimately my goal was I wanted to be a coordinator at some point in my career, and I wanted to be a head coach. I felt like all of those things helped me grow and make me more well-rounded for those opportunities as my ultimate goal. And so, for me to be a position coach in the NFL was a big deal for me.
Yeah.
Now my wife's pregnant again now with our second.
There you go. Got to switch it back up.
Moving her back across the country, and so that became a theme. She gets pregnant. Hey, we're going to move across the country. So
that's right.
But no, she was great again, supported the decision and was great. We knew that we loved Carolina. We had a great thing. It was really hard to leave Stanford. It was extremely hard.
Yeah.
I think one of the hardest things when you leave are leaving the relationships and the relationships for the players and the coaches.
Yeah.
You build such great, strong relationships in a short period of time in football because you spend so much time with each other. And you really, truly get to know people on a personal and a deep level because of the amount of time that you spend with each other. And you spend so much time with people, you either love them or you hate them.
Yeah, true
there is no in between.
Right.
And those special teams and those special staff that I've worked on. You build those strong relationships. Those are the hardest things to leave. It really, those are the things that pull at your heartstrings and really tug at your heart when you're making those tough decisions.
No doubt about it. Now, what I do want to ask you about and kind of make a segue here a little bit into kind of what you were talking about is you were only with the Panthers for a very short, year. You were just there in that 2013 season. And you talk about building relationships and making an impact. Clearly you were impactful in making a relationship with Coach Rivera, or, impressing him to some capacity for him, after a couple of years to call you as, only 1 year as an assistant there within that football organization. What maybe this question isn't for you to answer, but what do you think you did for him to feel like you were the guy that he needed to call when that position came open?
Yeah, that's probably a better question for him.
Yeah, for sure.
I do think, when he called and before he offered me the job just to see if I was interested, one of the things that he told me was, he respected my work ethic while I was there, thought that I did a great job, helping Ricky and, helping Coach Prohl in the room and building those relationships. And then Coach Shula had a great, trust and belief that I was ready to run the room.
Yeah.
It just felt like that I would be a great, strong presence for accountability and really hold the standard. I knew the standard because I'd been there. But I would throw it back to him, and just thank him and really Coach Shula. That was one of the reasons why I went to the Panthers the first time, and left the Jets, because they were going to give me more responsibility.
Yeah.
And when I left the Jets, they said, Lance, you're going to be the assistant receiver coach. We want you to be, we want you to help coach, help teach in the room, run drills at times, like be involved in game planning. And all of those things really helped me grow, and it gave me opportunities to show them who I would be if I got the opportunity to be the full-time position coach. So, I'm thankful for both of those guys for really helping me grow and pour into me the first time.
Yeah, that's awesome, Coach. Well, I'm kind of looking at my watch here. We got about a little over 5 minutes, so I'm gonna not rush too much, but I'm trying to get through these last couple stops here. So in 2019,
yeah, I've got a little bit of time. I've got until 4, so I'm okay.
Okay, all right, cool. Well, let's go ahead and jump to Notre Dame, because now you take an opportunity back at the collegiate level. What was the thought process there? What was the dialogue around taking this new opportunity?
Yeah, so for us, for my family, for my wife and I, we really got to a point where, we started saying, okay, what are our ultimate long-term goals?
Yeah.
What helped, fulfill our purpose and passion, and the reason I got into coaching. And for me, I love college football because of the impact that you get to make. That really comes back to my why, and for me, I'm very appreciative of my time in the NFL, loved my time in the NFL, and it helped shape and mold who I am, and really built some great relationships. But at the end of the day, I felt like I was able to have a larger and bigger impact on young men who are 17 to 22-year-olds, who are in a very impressionable time of their life, who are really going through, some tough adversities for the first time ever on their own. I was able to make a bigger impact than some guys who, like we talked about in the NFL, more of a business relationship.
Yeah.
The older guys, more mature, who have families, who don't really, want or need that guidance nearly as much. And so ultimately, I felt like, hey, I would like to be a coordinator and head coach. Those are my ultimate goals. I think I want to be a coordinator and head coach at the collegiate level, not the NFL level. And so she really, kind of put it back on me, if you want to be at the collegiate level, then, do we need to make a move, to be back in the college game? Because ultimately, the longer you're out of the college game, the more question marks are going to be about recruiting and, the way the game is changing. And I said, great point. And so, we made some tough decisions there, and again, left a place that we loved, and there's some strong relationships, but ultimately felt like, the driver of those decisions were my ultimate goals. And, we're able to go to Notre Dame, and you want to talk about another, great coach and legendary coach that I was able to work for, Coach Brian Kelly, and, go there and coach running backs there for Coach Kelly.
Yeah. And, Kyron Williams, back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons in 20 and 21, college football bowl appearance, and what year was that? 2020, 2021 Fiesta Bowl appearance. Obviously, traditionally program and, traditionally historic program, excuse me. During that time there, what were you kind of able to gather as you were, you were saying you were kind of collecting these pieces along the way? What were you kind of able to gather that ultimately helps you now as you sit in this head chair?
Yeah, I think, I've been fortunate enough to be around some really great head coaches. We've talked about, all of them, but they were all very different in how they approached it, but they were still all very successful. And so I was able to see, I left Alabama and I thought that there was only one, one way to do it, and that was it. It was the Saban one. And so, then I go work for Jerry Moore, who was, very relationship based and very, hands off, and very, and Coach Kelly was the same. Coach Kelly was so great at being the CEO. At that time, during his, head coaching career, he wasn't calling plays anymore. He was true CEO, and he was a great culture builder. He put the right staff in place and the right players in place, and then really set the fabric and foundation for great culture. And that's one of the things that I learned from him that was so great. And I've been able to take pieces of those things from all of those great head coaches and now mix, mold them into my personality and what I believe in, and kind of make it my own. And so that part has been, really significant in who I am as a head coach. And, people always ask me, what head coach, do you feel like you model your head coaching style after, or your program after? And, I would have to say it's been a great mix of all of those guys. I've taken things that I've really loved from each and every one of them. I think there's things that we use every single day in our program, whether it's from staff structure, whether it's from motivation, whether it's from player evaluation to scheme to, whatever it is, every single day, a piece of something from each and every one of those coaches that I was around.
Yeah, and I definitely want to hit on Louisville real quick, but kind of talking about that. I mean, I think you make an interesting point, because how easy would it be to just say, hey, man, I'm going to be Nick Saban 2.0, or I'm going to be, named the coach, David Shaw 2.0. But to be able to take some of it, and then obviously you have this very special characteristic trait that probably began well before your walk-on experience, especially with a family in construction and stuff like that. Just blue collar, hard worker and all that kind of stuff, and just mixing it all together and being yourself. Because, even if you do take a page of that Nick Saban, that doesn't mean it's going to work at Western Michigan, because, you guys, great program, all that kind of stuff, but you got your own set of problems, as every university does. And, you definitely have to be able to kind of tune it to where you're at and to your personality. Now, like I said, I want to talk a little bit about the OC experience. In 2022, you get the opportunity to be offensive coordinator, which I've been excited for you to check that box, especially kind of diving into your experience here a little bit more. We don't talk much scheme here almost at all, but I am very curious, what, from a terminology standpoint, how did you walk into that job from an OC standpoint? Were you very West Coast NFL pro style, or did you kind of, change things up to, where some of these teams are just saying Apple and it's a whole offensive concept, at the collegiate level a little bit more? How did you approach that?
Yeah. So, like you said, that was one box that I had not checked in my coaching career was a coordinator. And it was kind of the next step that I wanted to be able to take was to be a coordinator. And so, had an opportunity with Coach Satterfield at Louisville, And Coach Satterfield is a great offensive mind, a great offensive play caller, had a ton of success. He's also an App State guy. So, again, relationship-wise, I'd gotten to know Coach Satterfield. He was not on staff when I was at App State. Okay, he had moved on at that point, but he still had a home there. So they vacation in the summer, and he would come spend time with us and our staff and really clinic and talk ball. And that was how I built a relationship with him. And I just, when you look at his team, they've always had high offensive production.
Absolutely.
And really, to me, he's one of the best play callers that I've been around. And, I took the job as offensive coordinator at Louisville, one, knowing that, initially I was not going to call plays. It was an opportunity to grow into the play caller. So I was going to continue to learn from him. And at some point, he wanted to turn over play calling to me. And so, I knew that, but for me to, one, check the box to, be able to do that and then learn from him, learn under him, a way for me to grow into the position. And, so we kept their terminology. They're a wide zone team, quarterback run team. We had Malik Cunningham, who was a dynamic player at quarterback for us. He was really special. Couple of things that I was able to bring was, some of our passing game and also some of our Q run game that we had done with the Panthers with Cam Newton as our quarterback. So that was some of the value that I was able to add there. But we kept all of their terminology. I was able to really learn the wide zone at a really high level, because of how they run outside zone and all the different ways and complements that they run off of it, and then boots and nakeds and play action shots off of it. And so that part was really cool for me. When you look at our team here, at Western Michigan, that's a lot of what we do, wide zone, outside zone, naked, boot, play action. To me, it helps stretch the defense, horizontally, to create those gaps and seams to cut the defense from a run game standpoint. And so, still carry over a lot of those principles. So that was a really special time for me. I was only there for one season. It's crazy, leave Notre Dame and go there, and we were only there one season, but I learned so much from him. Coach Satterfield does a great job. He's so calm, cool, and collected all the time. And that's one of the things that makes him a great play caller. I think that's one of the things that I've had to learn in my career. I'm so passionate and, energetic. I can be emotional. And that's one of the things that as a coach, and especially as a head coach, you try to know when to, when to be emotional and when not to be emotional. Because everybody else, it's like being the quarterback. And that's one thing that I didn't understand about being the head coach, because I'd never been a quarterback. But everybody feeds off of your energy and emotion. And so you can affect the whole. And if it's not positive, it's negative. And it can have, diminishing returns when you don't know when to do it or how to do it in a positive way. And most of the time, we want to get emotional at the worst times, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
when everybody needs to be, when everybody wants to look for guidance and clarity and direction, and be calm under siege, not it's that flight or flight risk.
Yeah, that's right. Now, I do have to ask, I love staying chronological, and I do have another question about Louisville, but just because you brought it up, now with you being a head coach, how involved are you offensively, with your offensive coordinator? Do y'all have a similar dynamic to Coach Satterfield and yourself when you were OC, or, how is that managed right now?
Yeah, no. When I became a head coach, even before I became a head coach, I made a decision that, I didn't want to be their play caller. I wanted to be able to be, manage, all aspects of the program, from offense to defense to special teams to, in-game, time management, timeout management, recruiting, all of those things. And, listen, I'm not one of those guys. There's some guys who are play callers and head coaches that do it at a high level. Coach Satterfield is one of them. Yeah. I'm not smart enough to be able to do that. I can't. I'm not. I've got a ton of respect for those guys who do it. I think it's really hard right now in college football to be able to do that at a high level, unless you're able to build the staff, and have enough support around you, where and enough veteran experience, and maybe some former head coaches on your staff that you can really lean on so that you can be more involved. Yeah. But when you're worried about what you're going to call on 3rd and 5, it's hard to really build great relationships and understand, have a pulse on the team or know what we're doing in special teams that week. And so, again, some coaches can do it. I think in the current landscape of where I'm at as a new, first time head coach, but also with NIL and transfer portal,
Yeah.
it's so much that takes my attention that I need to be involved with. That I want to allow our coordinators to be able to call to me. I still watch the film with all three phases, with all three coordinators, the offense, defense, and special teams. I'm going to have some ideas and some directions in which way I want to go. But ultimately, when we get to game day, I want them to be able to, call it and manage it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Now, kind of going back just really quick here to Louisville, because I did want to ask this question. Once again, an interview related. It's your first time interviewing for our offensive coordinator job when you take the Louisville job. What was kind of some of the differences and, things that you were just in the short time talking to you, I'm assuming you were uber prepared for it, but, what were some things that you had to prepare for, maybe not necessarily were prepared for?
Yeah, I think that as you go through interviews, each phase is a little bit different, right?
Yeah.
I mean, as a position coach, when you're a GA and you're trying to become a position coach, that's the first level of, you're going to have some hard, tough questions, for some of the first times that you're going through that. When you go from a position coach to a coordinator, now that's an even different, interview process. And so, really Coach Sat and I, because we knew each other, had a great relationship, he really wanted to talk more pass game than run game.
Okay.
They had done really well in the run game, but he wanted some ideas of what we had done pass game wise, and also from a Q run standpoint. He wanted to know how we ran duo there at Notre Dame, because we had a ton of success with Kyron Williams running duo. And so, from a run game, from a pass game, from a protection standpoint, much more intricate and detailed, and really nuts and bolts of some things that I've done at other places, and how I felt like we could help them.
And now I want to tie that question a little bit into you getting that head job at Western Michigan. Obviously, it's exciting. I can't even imagine, being named the FBS head coach. Just the excitement that'll flow through you, and then that excitement leaves, and now you got to get down to business. You got to hire staff. Just specifically with the coordinators, what was your thought process? Not necessarily in the guys, but who you ultimately end up hiring. But what goes on through a first time head coach's brain when you say, okay, I got an interview for a defensive job? You had never coached defense. I know you've been around some great guys, and Rex Ryan and some of the defensive coaches on some of these staffs you've been on. But what are some of the checklist things that you kind of put together for those two roles?
Yeah, so to me, as a head coach, when you're looking at your staff, the two things that are ultimately critical are alignment and then fit. One, does it align with what you're looking for and what you ultimately want your team to look like? And then what is the fit, not only from a schematic standpoint, but also a personality and character standpoint.
Yeah.
And so those are ultimately the things that, I'm going to look for. I had a couple of head coaching interviews before I got Western Michigan's, interview. So I'd gone through a couple of, head coaching processes that I didn't get the job, was turned down for, came in second for. And so, I was able to continue to think through the processes when I didn't get those jobs. What are the things that I need to do better? And also because that head coaching interview is much more intense and a higher level, in terms of what they're looking for. I really had to think through next level in terms of staffing, how, and so really I built, it's just like in recruiting, we build up position profiles. And so what are the position characteristics that we're looking for? So I did that for my staff, from an offensive coordinator standpoint, what are the things that I'm looking for? From a, wide receiver coach, here are the must-haves. What are the core characteristics? From an offensive coordinator standpoint, I wanted somebody who had great experience, high-level experience, really put pressure on the defense, would adapt to his personnel, not necessarily married to scheme, and this is my scheme and what we're going to run, but wants to evaluate what our personnel is and what we're good at. Those were the things that were ultimately critical for me from an offensive standpoint. And then from a defensive standpoint, I wanted an attack mentality. I wanted somebody that was going to challenge everything, that had a high energy, high juice, was a really good recruiter, and again, was going to be able to evaluate what is our personnel and how do we put that personnel in the best position to succeed with having an attack mentality to challenge everything, make everything hard. And so, I've learned a lot as a head coach in terms of, interviewing and hiring process. And, I think it's one of the most critical things that you do as a head coach, because I'm only as good, it's really the people that I hire around.
No question. Yeah.
And that's why I always go back to alignment and fit. If those things are great, it may not be exactly what you thought you were getting, or it may not be exactly what you thought you were going to run scheme-wise, or maybe, but if you get those two things right, and you get the right person in place, then you're going to be able to have a guy that, one, ultimately has your back, carries the message and mission forward from your ultimate goals, and builds great relationships with the players. And so, that's where I've been fortunate. Hired some great people around me. I love our staff right now. We've built a great staff here that I'm really excited about going into year 3. I think you learn a lot of things on the way. I've made more mistakes. And again, it's just like you asked me, my first full-time position job, what were some of the things that I learned? We'd need several hours here to tell you all the things I've learned and messed up as a head coach. But the one thing that I can tell you is being in this team is so different. You think you think you're prepared. I thought, as an assistant, I thought I had, you always, why does head coach do this? Why, there's so many decisions that you have to make that affect so many people, and ultimately you just want to do what's best for the team. Yeah. It's not about one person. It's not about one side of the ball. It's not about any group of individuals. It's about what is ultimately best for the team. And, and so you have to make some of those decisions that are hard, that are tough, that people, you're trying to make what's best for, what's best for everybody, what's best for the team. And ultimately, a lot of people don't understand those decisions, but, I've been fortunate, here in year 3, to hire a great staff, and really excited about what we're doing going into year 3 here.
Yeah, Coach. Well, I tell you what, man, this has been so enjoyable on my end. We'll definitely be cheering you on and rooting you on. And, one of the things that I said we'll talk about here to kind of close the podcast up was, you recently joined the AFCA's board, which is vital, especially in this, challenging time of college football. So different from, when I played and you played. Why was it important for you to be involved and, kind of step up to the plate in this challenging time?
Yeah, first, one, it was, huge honor, very blessed to be represented on the board of trustees. And, when Craig Bowl called me, I just, was really, excited about the opportunity. But also, just didn't really feel worthy, to be honest with you, in terms of, the responsibility and, really, the mission that he has set forth. And, Craig's done an awesome job, got a ton of respect for him. I think he's a guy that, one, has been a head coach, and he's worn multiple hats. And now he's a great, advocate, not only for us as coaches, but also, for the game and sport of football. And that was one of the things that he really challenged me with, and said, what was our challenge was, this is, you got to take off your Western Michigan hat. Yeah. You got to take off your MAC hat. You got to take off your Lance Taylor and what's best for Lance Taylor and his team hat. Yeah. What's best for the sport as a whole. And how do we make some of those hard decisions and come together, one, to have a strong voice and have unity in our sport. And, that's where I'm really honored to have this, have this opportunity to hopefully grow the game of football and make some, game-changing decisions, for our sport. And again, not what's best for us here at Western Michigan or for, the MAC in general, but just, not only for coaches, but also for the players. And I think, they've entrusted us to make some great decisions, some heavy decisions that will impact, future generations of coaches and players. And to me, that's a great honor. It's a great responsibility. It's a great duty, one that I take, very, very seriously. And as I've talked to other head coaches, Dabo Sweeney and Coach Saban, and, you look at, they have spent their life, trying to help players and help the game of football. And I think where some of the frustration for just coaches in the past several years is there haven't been enough of us that have stepped up to help make this sport better. We've all done what's best for us individually, and we've all kind of looked through a straw in terms of, what's best through my glass or through my lens, instead of what's best for, us as a whole, for us as a sport, and also, the players being included in that. And, so I'm really excited. I think that, it really is a critical time for us as coaches and in our sport, especially college football. All the things that we're going through, it's going through so much change, and even more change is coming up. How do we help navigate and really, set forth some rules and parameters so that we, there aren't inherent competitive advantages, that we're all playing on a level playing field, so to speak. We all have the same opportunity to go out and win on Saturdays, just like everybody else does.
Absolutely. Well, Coach, man, just from what I've learned about you in this short period of time, there's no better man for the job, to kind of represent that MAC and, help move the game forward. So we appreciate you stepping up to the plate, on behalf of the AFCA. And I know you guys will be getting to work here over in Arizona, I think next week or something like that. And so hopefully that's productive. And, definitely look forward to walking up to you and shaking your hand at the AFCA convention there in Charlotte in 2026. So, Coach, we appreciate the time. Thanks so much for, kind of sharing your story and dropping some nuggets so these young guys can take some things away and help themselves develop and grow through the profession. So we appreciate you, Coach, and best of luck.
Thanks so much for having me on. It's been a pleasure meeting you, and I appreciate what you do for us and as coaches, and continue to spread the message.
Yes, sir. All right, Coach. Have a good one.
Great seeing you.
CoachComm has been delivering tough headsets for tough teams for more than 31 years. It's why 97% of FBS teams and thousands of high schools across the country rely on CoachComm. Get the best for your team. Visit CoachComm.com for more info.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Inside the Headset, presented by CoachComm. If you'd like to learn more about this week's episode, head over to AFCA.com. There, you can access every episode and find corresponding show notes. Remember, you can catch every episode of Inside the Headset presented by CoachComm on wherever you get your podcasts, including Spotify, Apple, and YouTube. While you're there, we'd love for you to take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast. Your feedback helps us improve and grow. Keep up with the latest news by following us on social media. Connect with us at Inside the Headset, and remember to tag us when you share your favorite episodes. For more updates on all things AFCA, be sure to follow the @WeAreAFCA social media accounts. If you're not a part of the AFCA community yet, visit AFCA.com to join thousands of NFL, college, and high school coaches nationwide and across the globe. Elevate your coaching game with an AFCA membership. You'll gain exclusive access to the annual AFCA convention, magazine, digital library, and AFCA Insider email. Stay up to date with the latest stories and news on the AFCA website. More than just a convention, the AFCA offers continuous education, guidance, networking, and more. Celebrate the past and shape the future with the AFCA. It's about fostering exceptional coaches who create outstanding teams and even better individuals. Invest in your skills and make a lasting impact today by engaging with the AFCA. Your journey starts here.